Today we're exploring more incredible revenge tales from history. Peter wed of Portugal, it's 1340, and Peter, the Portuguese king's son, reluctantly awaits his future bride's arrival. This marriage wasn't something Peter wanted. It was entirely his father, King Alfonso's scheme. Portugal was a relatively modest kingdom, sharing borders with Castile, a large and mighty nation. Understanding it was wiser to forge alliances than create adversaries. Alfonso arranged for his son to wed the daughter of an influential Castilian nobleman. The agreements were finalized, and the king felt confident his son's marriage would help maintain his kingdom's safety and stability. He could never have imagined what would transpire next. The royal delegation from Castile arrives, and out steps the most gorgeous woman Peter had ever laid eyes on. His jaw drops and he can't stop gazing. Wow, she is absolutely stunning, a complete knockout, and the future monarch instantly becomes madly infatuated. But there was a significant problem. The woman he was staring at wasn't actually his bride-to-be. She is a woman named Inés de Castro, his future wife's handmaiden. His actual fiancée, Constanza, exits the carriage next and approaches Peter to meet him. She's pleasant enough, but no matter how hard the prince attempts to concentrate on the woman who would soon become his queen, he simply cannot tear his eyes away. Peter and Constanza get married to honor the agreement signed by their fathers, and they proceed to have a very miserable marriage. The entire time, Peter is not so secretly involved with Inés, and gossip of their relationship rapidly circulates through the court. Constanza grows increasingly irritated with her husband's unfaithfulness, and eventually she attempts to get him to designate Inés as godmother to one of her children. This was something that during that era would essentially make the relationship incestuous. But that infant died within a week of birth, so Inés avoided that situation. As frustrated as Constanza was with Peter, his father Alfonso was even more furious. His foolish son couldn't control himself, and now his relationship was endangering the entire kingdom. An important detail in this tale is that Inés's brothers were influential but currently exiled Castilian noblemen who rapidly became friends with Peter when he started his affair with their sister. Peter started giving them significant positions in his court, and Alfonso worried that his idiotic son might get pulled into some Castilian political conflict. The king begins attempting to exile Inés from Portugal, dispatching her to various regions in the Iberian Peninsula, but his son just spends all of his time composing letters to her. Ultimately, all of his attempts to separate his son and mistress fail, and Alfonso is compelled to keep her closer to him in Lisbon to monitor both of them. Constanza dies in 1349 due to childbirth complications. Peter is still fulfilling his royal betrayal obligations of producing new heirs, by the way. And when this occurs, Peter is ecstatic. Finally, he can officially wed Inés and live happily ever after. But King Alfonso is having none of it. He exiles Inés to Coimbra and explicitly prohibits Peter from marrying her. Peter, unsurprisingly, tells his dad to forget it and follows Inés to Coimbra, where they live together and have 4 children. Alfonso is now at his breaking point. These illegitimate heirs could one day attempt to claim the throne, and Portugal could descend into civil war. Enough was enough. Inés had been nothing but problems since she arrived 15 years ago. His son must choose Portugal or this woman, and so Alfonso devises a plan to ensure Peter picks correctly. In 1355, King Alfonso sends 3 men to Coimbra. They find Inés in a monastery, and in front of her young children they decapitate her and depart. Peter returns and discovers the love of his life dead, and he is absolutely destroyed. He weeps loudly, overwhelmed by feelings of sorrow and guilt for failing to protect her. But soon his tears burn hot with hatred and rage towards his father. Peter raises an army and begins attacking and terrorizing areas in northern Portugal. In his attempts to prevent a future civil war, the king had accidentally triggered exactly what he had feared. The forces of Peter and Alfonso fought for nearly the entire year, and in the end, Peter loses. His mother, the queen, is able to negotiate a ceasefire between father and son, but the prince never forgives his father. 2 years later, Alfonso dies, and Peter becomes the new king of Portugal. He immediately orders that the men who murdered Inés be captured and brought to him. The assassins are hunted for years, until 2 of them are finally apprehended in Castile in 1361. The 2 assassins are dragged before Peter, and with contempt in his eyes, the king stares at the men who killed his beloved Inés. The men are put on trial in public and found guilty. As punishment, Peter orders their hearts to be ripped out while they are still alive. Some sources say that he himself participated in the execution, screaming, "You have done the same to my heart." What usually comes next in this story is legendary, meaning it may not have actually happened, but it is said that Peter then declared to the crowd that he had married Inés before she died, and that she was his rightful queen. He has Inés's body exhumed, dresses her corpse in the finest clothing, and places her on the throne, lovingly staring at the remains of his mistress. He crowns Inés the Queen of Portugal. He then forces every single nobleman to swear his loyalty to his queen by kissing her decomposing hand. Following this coronation story, which may or may not be true, Peter then had Inés entombed in the Alcobaça monastery. In his final will, Peter orders that when his time comes, he also be laid to rest there with Inés. Inscribed in the marble of his tomb are the words Ate aula, Fim do mundo, until the end of the world. And that is where they both are to this very day. Shi Jianqiao. The early half of the 20th century was a time of complete chaos in China. In 1912, due to political pressures, the 6-year-old Qing Emperor Puyi abdicated his throne, officially ending the 268-year-old dynasty. Within just 4 years, the country that was once the most powerful nation in Asia devolved into a land of constant violence, with areas governed by regional warlords fighting for control over the now powerless government in Beijing. This era is known today as the Warlord era, and amidst the mayhem, a young woman would make history when she set out on a decade-long quest to avenge the death of her father. It's the 1920s, and Shi Gulan is a college student in Tianjin. Unlike most people who were suffering greatly in the Warlord era, Gulan's life had taken quite the opposite turn. Her father, Shi Kongbin, had enlisted in the local military, and he quickly rose through the ranks. By 1925, he had gone from being the son of a simple farmer and tofu seller to a brigade general serving a powerful warlord aligned with the Fengtian clique. His family, including Shi Gulan, had in the process gained the status and prestige that came with such a rank. Everything was going great until a conflict broke out between the Fengtian and Zhili cliques that changed her life forever. By October of 1925, the Fengtian had defeated the Zhili. But a military governor named Sun Chuanfang had used the opportunity to seize control of his area, becoming a very powerful warlord himself. Shi Kongbin is deployed with a brigade of mercenaries to capture a city in Chuanfang's territory, and things initially go well for him. But during the battle, he and his men are caught off guard by a surprise attack led by the warlord himself. Kongbin's forces are quickly overwhelmed and he is taken hostage. The following day, he is tied up and brought to a local train station. A crowd gathers, and Chuanfang orders his prisoner beheaded. Kongbin's head is paraded around the station on a bamboo pole and then displayed for all to see. News of her father's death reaches the young Shi Gulan, and she initially mourns the loss of her father. But soon her tears of sadness burn her cheeks, and she is consumed by anger. This warlord had not just killed her father. By displaying his head, he had dishonored his entire family. How could anyone tolerate such disrespect? She swears that she will stop at nothing to avenge her father and restore her family's honor. But that would be much easier said than done. Chuanfang was now one of the most powerful warlords in China, and Shi Gulan, well, she was a 21-year-old college student. The thought of a random student assassinating someone that powerful seemed highly improbable. But Gulan had made up her mind. She changes her name to Shi Jianqiao, the Avenging Sword, and sets out on a quest for revenge. But before she was able to find Chuanfang, the warlord's life would take the most peculiar turn as well. By 1926, Chinese citizens were sick and tired of the warlord system. A group from the south of China, called the Kuomintang, took advantage of this public sentiment, and they set out on their own quest to defeat every warlord in China to reunite the country. This whole event, called the Northern Expedition, probably deserves its own video. But to massively oversimplify the story, the warlords were all defeated by the KMT in about 2.5 years. This didn't really fix the constant fighting in China, but with the warlord system gone, Chuanfang lost everything he had worked for. Left with nothing to show from the last 15 years of being a ruthless warlord general, Chuanfang shaves his head and actually becomes a devout Buddhist. Well, all that is respectable and all, I guess. Shi Jianqiao didn't get the memo, and she begins tirelessly working to unearth clues to identify and locate her father's killer. For 10 whole years, she chases leads, traveling hundreds of miles, searching for Chuanfang, until finally she finds him in the city of Tianjin. As she watches the former warlord from the shadows, it takes all of her self-control not to end him right then and there. But she had spent a decade of her life in preparation for this moment. She knew that she would only have one shot to take him down, and she could not waste that opportunity. So instead, she stalks her prey for months, learning his daily routine until finally she had selected the perfect place to enact her revenge. On November 13, 1935, Shi Jianqiao steps into a Buddhist hall and, as expected, finds Chuanfang kneeling with his eyes closed, leading a group in the chanting of a sutra. As he continued the recitation, Shi Jianqiao slowly walked directly behind her father's murderer and carefully drew her pistol. She points her weapon at the former warlord and coldly unloads 3 rounds into his head and back. Chuanfang instantly falls dead, and the hall erupts into panic. But instead of trying to run away, Jianqiao proudly sits next to the dead body and begins to hand out leaflets she had prepared prior to the killing that explained why she did what she had just done. Shi Jianqiao is arrested for murder, but the media picks up the story of the killing of Chuanfang, and it instantly divides the people of China. The traditionalists see her actions as the ultimate form of filial piety, the Confucian doctrine of love and honor for one's parents, while the modernists demand justice and to uphold law and order. Her court case becomes the biggest story of the year, and eventually reaches the Supreme Court in Nanjing. Due to overwhelming public support, she was granted a full state pardon, and the killing of Chuanfang was deemed an ethically justifiable act of filial piety. Having avenged her father's death, she peacefully lives out the rest of her days and dies in 1979 at the age of 74. Qutuz, Okay, this last story completely blew me away because not only was it the first time someone actually stopped the Mongol conquest in its tracks, it's probably one of the craziest movie-like stories of revenge in history. It's 1231, and the once vast and powerful empire known as Khwarezm lies in complete ruin. As retribution for the disrespect shown to Mongol emissaries by the governor of Otrar, Genghis Khan and his army had invaded the land, killing an estimated 15 million people as they burned entire cities to the ground. Amongst the remnants of the once proud civilization, the Mongols, who continue their occupation of the land, find a young Khwarezmian prince and sell him to a slave merchant in Egypt. The boy is purchased by the local sultan and is put into training to become a Mamluk, a warrior class of slaves used by the rulers of the Muslim world as elite soldiers. The former prince is thrown in with the rest of the slave children and is forced to endure the strictest of training regimens designed to turn boys into hardened men. From a young age, he is thrust into combat against other children, and he is given the name Qutuz, the ferocious one, because he fights like a vicious beast against the other slaves. Qutuz rises through the ranks and eventually becomes the vice-sultan of Egypt in 1253. By now, the Mamluks had revolted against their masters and established their own sultanate, becoming the rulers of the land. Against all odds, the former prince had made his way from slavery back to a royal position, but an easy life was not his destiny, and ghosts from his past would soon return to haunt him. Though Genghis Khan had died in 1227, his grandson Hulagu Khan had continued the Mongol expansion westward. Like demons, they had brought nothing but death and destruction to every land they touched. In 1258, they sacked the city of Baghdad and massacred all of its inhabitants, ending the Islamic Golden Age. The Mongols then pushed into Syria and took the cities of Aleppo and Damascus. The Ayyubid Sultan sends word to Egypt pleading for help against the Mongols, and Qutuz is haunted by the memories of the destruction of his homeland. He knows the horrors the horde from the east will bring. And if the Mamluks are to have any chance of survival, Egypt must have strong leadership. He deposes the young and inexperienced sultan and takes the throne for himself. As if on cue, Hulagu Khan's diplomats soon arrive in Cairo, and they begin to read a very Mongol-sounding message to the new sultan. From the King of Kings of the East and West, the great Khan, to Qutuz, the Mamluk, who fled to escape our swords. You should think of what happened to other countries and submit to us. You have heard how we have conquered a vast empire and have purified the earth of the disorders that tainted it. We have conquered vast areas, massacring all the people. You cannot escape from the terror of our armies. Where can you flee? What road will you use to escape us? Our horses are swift, our arrows sharp, our swords like thunderbolts, our hearts as hard as the mountains, our soldiers as numerous as the sand. Fortresses will not detain us, nor armies stop us. Your prayers to God will not avail against us. We are not moved by tears, nor touched by lamentations. Only those who beg for our protection will be safe. Hasten your reply before the fire of war is kindled. Resist, and you will suffer the most terrible catastrophes. We will shatter your mosques and reveal the weakness of your God, and then we will kill your children and your old men together. At present, you are the only enemy against whom we have to march. As the messenger speaks his final words, the Mamluk advisors are literally shaking in fear. Qutuz looks to his officials and his blood begins to boil. He calls for counsel away from the Mongol diplomats, and in private, the Sultan begins an impassioned plea to the council. You all have lived good lives funded by the taxes of the people, and now you wish to abandon them. Qutuz continues to argue with those who wish to flee, and his voice begins to quiver with desperation. Finally, he looks to his advisers as tears begin to stream down his cheeks. "My brothers, who will defend Islam if not us?" The Mongols had taken everything from him as a child. He could not let them do it again. The generals and nobles are moved by his words, and despite knowing they would most likely be accepting their own deaths with the decision, they agree to follow him into battle. With that, Qutuz and his men solemnly return to the Mongol messengers. The Sultan looks towards his guests and calmly gives a signal. His soldiers step forward and slice the diplomats in half. Their heads are removed and hung from the gates of Cairo as an open act of defiance. A letter is sent to Hulagu notifying the Mongols that the Mamluks will not bow down and will instead fight to the end. Qutuz is soon joined by a rival Mamluk general named Baybars, a man who was also sold into slavery as a child by the Mongols, and they quickly begin to raise an army and set out to confront the enemy from the east. The Mamluks cobble together 24,000 men, but they are vastly outnumbered by the Mongols, nearly 3-1. It looks like this will be another trademark Mongol massacre, but fate intervenes when the great Khan Mongke dies. Hulagu is forced to return to his homeland to help decide on the successor and takes most of his army with him. He leaves his trusted general Kitbuka with around 12,000 warriors to finish the job. Kitbuka had recently converted to Christianity, so he recruits some Christian soldiers from Armenia and Georgia to bulk up his army, and then begins preparations to invade Egypt. Qutuz gets word that Hulagu had left the area, and he and Baybars immediately ride out to force a battle with Kitbuka. They find the Mongols camped near a spring called Ain Jalut in Galilee. Baybars had spent time in the area as a fugitive and was familiar with the terrain, and he comes up with a battle plan to use the Mongols' own tactics against them. The bulk of the Mamluk army commanded by Qutuz is left hiding in the trees, and Baybars takes a small detachment to directly attack the Mongols. Baybars and his men charge the Mongol camp and harass them for hours with hit-and-run tactics. Every time the Mongols run out to fight, the Mamluks pull back closer and closer to Qutuz. Eventually, Kitbuka grows frustrated and he orders a full charge. This is exactly what Baybars had been waiting for, and he quickly orders his warriors to fall back. The Mongols, now enraged that the Mamluks are again running away, blindly chase them, and Baybars and his men lead them directly to Qutuz. The trap had been set, and the Sultan gives the order. Qutuz's army emerges from the forest, and archers send a storm of arrows down onto the unsuspecting Mongol riders. The Mamluk heavy cavalry then makes a full charge and smash directly into the enemy line. Kitbuka and his warriors are initially shocked by this surprise attack, but they quickly regain their composure and begin fighting back. The battle is brutal, and the Mongols quickly prove that their reputation was well earned as they begin to savagely tear through the Mamluk army. Qutuz watches from a distance as his left flank begins to falter, and it appears that the Mongol forces are about to break through. His mind is flooded with memories of his childhood. He cannot let history repeat itself, and so, without a moment's hesitation, Qutuz abandons his post and charges headfirst into battle. As he rides, he throws off his helmet and shouts, "O Islam! O Allah! Grant your servant Qutuz a victory against these Mongols!" His warriors turn to see who is shouting and are shocked to see their sultan riding into battle to fight alongside them. Qutuz continues to charge forward. "O Islam!" he screams, and his words fill the Mamluks with renewed courage. They regain their composure and they begin to fight back. The battle rages on with Qutuz now on the front lines, and soon the Mongols do something they had never done before. They begin to retreat in fear. Kitbuka cannot believe his eyes as his warriors flee past him. He tries to rally his remaining men, but it is no use. The Mongol general and those who stay to fight are all slain in battle. Hulagu receives word of the Mongol defeat at Ain Jalut and is enraged. He orders the execution of the last of his Ayyubid prisoners, but the damage had already been done. The illusion of Mongol invincibility had been shattered. 5 days after the Battle of Ain Jalut, Qutuz and Baybars retake Damascus, and within a month they also free Aleppo from Mongol control. 2 men who had been sold into slavery as children by the Mongols had pulled off what no one had ever dreamed possible. They had stopped the unstoppable horde from the east, avenged the Khwarezmian Empire, and saved the Muslim and Christian world. Throughout the following decades, the Mongols would attempt multiple invasions into Syria, but would be pushed back time and time again until eventually the descendants of Hulagu themselves eventually converted to Islam. If you can't beat them, join them, I guess. As for Qutuz, as epic as his story is, it ends on kind of a down note. As his army was riding back to Cairo to celebrate their victory at Ain Jalut, he was assassinated by a group of his own soldiers, probably under the orders of Baybars himself. What? Don't hate the player, hate the game. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.